welcome. For those of you watching on YouTube, this is probably the sexy hair episode of the year, at least the year. So I am blessed to be sitting here with Giovanni and Flip Howard, who maybe the two best hairs in the industry. Giovanni hides his hat.
Giovanni's a distant second, but whatever.
So
Flip's hair on his head and his chest are the best. I mean,
Flip, do you ever wonder how your life might have been different if you had bad hair?
I don't even know. It's a dark picture. Yeah. I'm sure I'd be on a park bench somewhere.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Instead of being on a park bench somewhere, you do fly a little bit under the radar. So we're looking forward to getting uncensored with you. You are the CEO of WorkSuites, and how many locations are you up to now?
It's a good question. I think we have 24 signed. I think 3 are in the process of being built out. I think we have 21 open.
Okay. You are mostly in Dallas, in Houston. Where else?
Correct. Dallas and Houston are the only ones that are open. We have 2 coming in the Atlanta area.
In the Atlanta area. That's exciting. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us the WorkSuite story. So you did a rebrand in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So the WorkSuite story, I guess the quick version, started in 2001. We were Meridian Business Centers, and we were just a straight up, executive suite, like Regis style, and everybody else back then. Ran it from 2001 until 2017 with a 50-50 business partner. We were called Meridian Business Centers. I bought him out January of 18, and that's when we rebranded to WorkSuites and kind of pivoted our look and feel. And we have been, I think we have 10 new locations that we've built out, kind of under the WorkSuites new brand look and feel. And as our old leases come up, we usually, when the leases expire, we usually move out of the old buildings and into the new look and feel. And our kind of niche look and feel is, I describe it as on the style spectrum, kind of halfway between a Regis and a WeWork. So it's not a traditional old executive suite, kind of dark, depressing hallway of doors, but it is not a casual, beer keg, foosball table kind of place. It's still more private office, more kind of like a Regis type clientele, but inside we're, a mixture of glass and drywall and kind of a modern iteration of that.
Professional, modern. If you're watching on YouTube, Giovanni's background is showing a WorkSuites in Houston with a beautiful lobby. I love it. It's interesting, some cool lighting, great colors, lots of light. Who are your best members? What do they do? What's kind of their mindset? Why do they come to WorkSuites?
Yeah, it's funny. Whenever we try to do a blend, like an analysis of who's there, it's such an interesting mix because the biggest group is still always attorneys, just like it was when it was executive suites, but it's less than 10%. So the other 90% is everything else.
Wow,
we have a lot of we have a lot of tech startups. We have a lot of money managers and private equity guys, and just kind of our niche is, again, it's a little bit more mature, a little bit more. It's white label, meaning if you get off the elevators and look at our reception, our brand is nowhere. So because of that, we get a lot of money managers and attorneys, people who have clients come visit their office. But the mix really does matter. It's always, you need some young energy in there too. If you get a center that's just all stuffy old lawyers, that it's not fun. But if you
don't
get
have good hair like you and Gio,
right, exactly. But if you get a center that's all that's all youthful, and then it kind of scares away the the rich old guys. So it's always you do have to kind of curate a nice little blend. So,
and yeah, I think what I love about what you've done is, I call it a hybrid executive suite, right? Is you still have the density that it takes to make the floor plan super efficient. And I think that's where WeWorkspaces and others have kind of gone wrong, is they've missed out that efficiency. They've overplayed the co-working membership type of business and initiative, right? I mean, that's what percentage of your business is actually co-working memberships?
Yeah, basically what you're saying, Gio, is I actually try to make a profit. It's crazy, right? Yeah, very low. We have, I would say an average, of our total revenue, it's just a couple of percent. Even total members, it's it's a couple of percent. In an average location, we may have 100 private offices and maybe only a dozen or 2 dozen office memberships. And our co-working memberships are a little different too. We do have a hot desk room, but it's very small. It only has room for 6 or 8 in it. Our office memberships, which is kind of like the equivalent of a co-working or hot desk membership, we actually put the people in private offices. So it's kind of like part-time private offices that you just take your stuff with you when you go at night. So they're a little more expensive than most hot desk memberships, but you actually get a private room most of the time.
What's the typical square footage of a location?
We're doing, most of the new ones we try to be over 30, but 25 to 35,000 feet. We've got a couple that are over 40, but mostly we're in the 25 to 35,000 square foot size.
And you've recently tried a new model. Was it in downtown Houston? You tried something that's a little bit smaller?
Yeah, during COVID, we opened 2 small ones. We opened one in downtown Houston and one in downtown Fort Worth. They were each about 5,000 square feet and kind of a real trophy asset, most expensive building, best address in town. Predominantly because, COVID saw kind of a rise in virtual office, and mailbox stuff. So we were trying to capitalize on that and get some downtown locations. And so those locations they're very small. They're all full, but they only have 12 offices or 11 offices. They're really a virtual office location and a meeting room location. And I guess it's a little too early to see if it's, how that'll go, if we'll do it again. It's not really our mix. Being in a downtown high-rise CBD is not generally our demographic. We're more suburban, and most of our decision makers office in the office. And it's not like a hub for, teams coming from everywhere. So we typically avoid downtowns. These little small ones in downtowns for virtual office are going fine, but it's not our bread and butter.
In a typical location, what percentage of your revenue is virtual office revenue?
Yeah, we have a lot of virtual offices, and it really varies. Like in Houston, it's double what it is in Dallas. But I would say percentage of revenue is probably on average, maybe, less than 10%.
Okay.
About 7%-ish. I'm just doing math in my head.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Interesting.
And so what made you venture outside of DFW and Houston, just Texas in general? I know you've been looking at other markets and ultimately landed in Atlanta and probably still looking at other markets, but kind of how have you picked those markets? Why have you picked going outside of out of Texas? Yeah,
so a couple of things. One, I'm really settling on, I want a little bit, I don't know that I need, I think I have 16 locations in Dallas Fort Worth. I don't know that I need 16 locations in every market. You start to really kind of dilute your virtual office sales, your ability to raise rates. When you got, along Central Expressway, I've got, like, in 5 exits in a row, I think I have a location at 4 of the exits out of 6 or something like that. And that really starts to kind of cannibalize a little bit. So rather than go even deeper into Dallas, we thought places like Atlanta, Phoenix, some of the other big major markets in the middle of the country, there's some slam dunk locations. In Dallas, I've already got Legacy, and I've already got Southlake, and I've already got the Park City, Uptown. And so find those locations in other markets are real obvious, kind of no-brainers. As far as how we pick the markets that we pick, for me, again, Dallas is wonderful. Houston's wonderful. We've already added 2 in Atlanta, and we'll do some more. Then we'll be adding Phoenix in 2023. The 4 cities where the most people have moved in the last 5 years in order are Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, and Atlanta. So that's a big part of it. The Sun Belt, cosmopolitan, big city, kind of purple city, red state, type of markets, and they're growing. And it's also the type of customer that we tend to attract. People ask, why am I not in Austin? Austin's so close. Why would I go to Atlanta and Phoenix before, say, Austin? There's a couple of reasons for that. One, Austin is more of a co-worky kind of a town, whereas Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Atlanta, there's a lot more kind of mature, older money, my type of customers. But there are still plenty of my type of customers in Austin. The second problem with Austin for us is it's tough to get into right now. It's so frothy in Austin that the underlying product is so expensive and they're given so few concessions, that it's tough to get the deal terms that we like there. And that's another reason why we're at least starting with markets like, Atlanta, Phoenix, maybe Nashville, Charlotte, a lot of those kind of markets, as opposed to the New York, LA, Miami's, because, we still sign actual leases rather than management agreements most of the time. So if you sign a lease at the peak and, rates drop a lot and competitors come in at lower rates, you're in trouble. Markets like Dallas, Phoenix, Atlanta, that doesn't happen as much. There's times where it goes up more rapidly or levels out a little bit, but you don't see these, buildings going for $50 and then a couple of years later going for $30 with kind of the wild swings the way you see on the kind of coastal gateway markets. So we, at least for now, have stayed away from those.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to something Jamie said earlier. Is I think you fly under the radar, right? And I'm curious if you do that on purpose, because you're literally one of the most competitive people I know. You play tennis every day. I know that. And so is that a strategy that you use, or it just happened that way?
I would say it was definitely a strategy that we used for the 17 years we were Meridian Business Centers. That was kind of a conscious decision that my business partner and I made back then. Since then, it has not been a conscious strategy, but also has not been a conscious effort to not do that. So like before 2018, I would have, if asked to do this podcast, I would have just said no. Now, when asked, I say sure, but I don't go seeking out opportunities to do this. And I think that's largely because, it's a really simple capital structure. I own, a vast majority of the company. I'm the CEO. I own it. I kind of am my own boss, and I have to put my kids through college with profit. I want my revenue greater than my expenses. I'm not trying to put dots on a map and build a brand to get acquired. I'm not really trying to, like I said, make a splash to get a valuation. I'm just trying to make my revenue, the discrepancy between revenue and expenses, as big as possible.
And you brought up your family, so
I was going to say, Flip, how many kids are we putting through college?
Yeah. Well, I only have 5 left to put through college. I've got 2 of them I've already put through college. So I have 7 kids. Last year I had 3 in college at the same time, which is cheap. That was fun. So 3, but it actually was a blast. Having 3 college kids is so much fun. And we, my oldest 2 one got his master's last year and the other got her undergrad degree, and they're both engaged. So my oldest 2 kids are engaged to be married. So I'll probably be a grandpa with great hair soon, hopefully, So then I've got, so I have a son who's the oldest, and then 4 daughters in a row who are just graduated from college, going to be a sophomore in college, and then a senior and a sophomore in high school. And then 2 little boys at the bottom that are 14 and 10 and keep us young. So it's a lot of fun.
So Flip, you run a serious business, but I get the sense that you obviously value family. You spend a lot of time with your family. What is kind of your philosophy or your approach to kind of managing all of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Everyone says family first, and everyone means it in theory, but then how do you translate that to practice, right? I do think, I don't want to try to sound, it sounds braggy, but we spend a lot of time traveling together.
That's one of the things I notice about you. And I think you make that choice and you make it happen and you prioritize it above, you could spend all that time worrying about one of your locations or what's next in business. And somehow mentally you're able to not.
Yeah. And I also think I'm the kind of person who could tend towards micromanagement if I didn't stop myself. And so I think forcing myself, we just spent, all 9 of us and the 2 fiancés came over. We spent, a pretty good deal of time in Italy this summer. And so I have to trust all the people back here to just run everything. And that forces me to not get in the weeds on all this little stuff and allows me to actually CEO more. So in all honesty, I think the kind of balance, coaching my kids' sports teams and being home for dinner every night and all that kind of stuff, probably makes me a better CEO because I'm able to try to just stay big picture, not get all in the weeds. And if I have people who aren't capable of running this department or that department, it becomes pretty obvious because I give them a lot of leeway to, kind of sink or swim. And the ones that sink, it shows. That was one problem we had when I ran it with my business partner. He and I didn't do that very well. I probably worked a little too much back then. And it was hard to tell who was succeeding and who wasn't succeeding because we were doing the top half of everybody's job for them.
Yeah.
And I think one of the parts that I love about you is that you do make that time for family, but also I know that we like to razz each other and have a good time, but you really do have one of the biggest hearts for people, and you've surrounded yourself with people that you trust, right? I know you've got Tosh, who's been with you forever. You've got your brothers, I think, have worked with you to some capacity, and I think you recently just brought on a camp counselor from your kids' Catholic camp, right? And he's really helping out. So you want to talk about your team a little bit and kind of what allows for you to give the reins over for that time that you're with family?
Sure. Yeah, I do. You're right that I like people. I like almost everybody. And that there are some things that there are some difficulties that causes because I kind of start from a place of trust with everybody. And I've, definitely been burned by that. But if you're afraid of getting burned and you're afraid of making mistakes, you'll never do anything. You just have to take the getting burned when it happens and just kind of start with trust. So that's what I try to do. We've got a great, I have a handful of my 7 or 8 direct reports. I think most have been with me more than 10 years. And we've got like the guy we just hired. He's one of the new ones who's not been there 10 years, but I've worked with him for over 10 years. I was on the board of the camp that he was the camp director and ran. I watched him build this culture with hundreds of counselors every year. And I was like, I want that culture. I've watched the way, how much fun everybody had coming to work there. And I thought, I don't care if he knows anything about real estate. That's the kind of culture I want to set, for our employees, because he uses the term like the golden goose. He's like, if you just take care of your employees, they'll take care of your clients. You don't have to even worry about your clients if you've got the right, the right people. I think I think people overestimate training and underestimate just hiring the right person. Yes, training matters, of course, but if you hire the wrong person, no amount of training is going to make them, good at taking care of people. And if you hire the right person, they almost don't need to be trained much.
What's the secret to retention, though? That's an incredible tenure for your team, especially, post-COVID, the Great Resignation, people kind of rethinking what they want out of life. What do you think makes people stay?
I think it is, I tell everybody that I love business. I love commerce. I know it sounds like a dirty word nowadays, but capitalism. I love the fact that when I go to McDonald's and I drive through for breakfast this morning, they're glad to take my $8 and I'm glad they were there to give me a sausage biscuit for my $8, right? And I think that that's how the world is better because of commerce. And I think that the same dynamic needs to exist with employee-employer. I need to be glad to pay the salary to this person and glad they're there for me, and they need to be, glad in reverse. And if it ever turns into kind of one side is using the other, then it's not good. It's not a win-win scenario. All business needs to be win-win, and I think it's the same. So I tell all of my employees, like if I really know of a job opportunity for you, say with one of my friends' companies that is going to be better for your life, it's my moral obligation to tell you about that and to set you up with an interview for them. It's not just money. I mean, there's other things that go into their overall life scenario. And I think they all know I mean it because I show them that I mean it. And I really do care for the people who I've sort of allowed to get in my sort of inner, kind of inner circle. And I feel like, most of them would take a bullet for me and know I would do the same for them, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I did not miss the fact that you skipped over your brothers, but that's okay. We'll let it. You have a special.
I don't know.
They shoot bullets at each other. That's a different thing.
I love the camp counselor hire. I think that's, people talk about hiring like community managers from Starbucks and, because you see how they interact
right.
with people. And that's a really interesting, just move to, I can picture my daughter goes to a really great camp, and I've often thought like, man, how do they do it year after year? Yeah. The culture. So that's a great choice.
Yeah. We used to hire a lot of people from the residential real estate, like the apartment multifamily industry, because it seemed like such a natural segue. And it was the worst because there's such a dynamic of like, the tenant is wrong. They're all
Yeah.
95% full, no matter how much care they take of the tenants. And so there's this, they almost play policeman so much. And it was such a bad fit. I don't care that they both are somewhat related to real estate.
Yeah.
I'd rather hire people who, like I said, who care about valuing the customer experience than somebody who happens to have some real estate experience.
And so I'm going to take that back to your entrepreneurship. And I don't know if Jamie knows this. I'm sure you've told the story before, but I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur, right? So you were in college and you started a business. You want to tell us about that?
Wait, I did hear this story on the chairlift at Winterfest. I'm pretty sure that's where it was. I love this story.
I wonder which one we're talking about. I guess I'll try to get the quick version of all of them. Yeah, so I never had a job. When I was in high school, I used to walk around knocking on doors, painting addresses on curbs. We right out in college started an indoor advertising business selling ads in bathrooms of like bars and restaurants. And then right out of college started a pickup and delivery, same business partner on all these, same business partner who we started WorkSuites with, or Meridian back in the day. We started a pickup and delivery laundry and dry cleaning service for college campuses. And it was a good business. It was a hard business, hard way to make a living. I guess the story probably that you're thinking of, Jamie, are you talking about my competitor in that business?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think this whole story, all of it.
Yeah, so we thought like idiots who were 22 years old that in order to start a business, you had to come up with something new that nobody had ever done before. I probably would have made a lot more money if I just started a regular dry cleaner, like, on every corner and just done it better than they do it. But I didn't. We started this pickup and delivery, combining logistics and laundry, and it was a nightmare of a business to run. Anyway, we show up on campus the first day thinking we've got this genius idea, and it turns out there's a competitor, and it's a college student who is doing the same thing, but he's way more in with the university than we were. And so we're like in the back of the student center.
Wait, and where was this?
This is at SMU, and TCU, and University of Texas at Austin. But the first year I think was just SMU and TCU, and I think he was only at SMU. And so he was all in with the university, and he was a student. He knew everybody. So he was like in the move in of the dorms, and he was right up at the front. And we were like in the back of the student center. We're like only the nerds were hanging out, and he was like 3 times as big as we were the first year. But we just ran a good business and took care of the customers. And so the first year he was a lot bigger than us, and the second year we're about the same, and the third year we were bigger than them. And that, I'm trying to think how to say this right, but anyway, we ended up his business was, we ended up buying him out, and he went on to, and I would have thought he's never going to succeed at anything because we basically beat him. We won, right? Because he was a competitor, and we were friendly competitors, but he was a competitor. We won, he lost. We bought him for a small price. He's never going to amount to anything. And he went on to try to start a couple things that were all fail. And I would go, yeah, this guy's going to fail at, whatever he does. And then I'm watching a NBA Finals Mavericks game, and I see him on TV handing out shoes to kids in Africa, because it was Blake McCoskey who started Tom's Shoes, who's now like the founder of social entrepreneurship, worth $1 billion or whatever. And so don't ask my opinion of who's going to succeed or not succeed. Now, granted, when I beat him in this business, he was, I think, 19 and I was like 22. So
well, if it makes you feel better, he's only worth 300 million, not $1 billion.
Oh, okay. Well, phew, then he and I are neck and neck.
You're nipping at his heels. You're right there.
Right.
And it's funny because I've got a buddy that I went to Jesuit a couple years younger that was in his same grade, who Pat went on to be a Navy SEAL, but recently started a new business with Blake. And made for it. And so I just, as a matter of fact, just ordered their products a couple weeks ago. And it's basically a 10-month program that helps people deal with different things that basically create habits for success, right? And the first one's like hydration, right? And so we think it's so simple, but for the 21 days, you have a hydration focus, and then you have another one that's gratitude. And so it's really interesting. But I mean, I think I love that story, right? Because y'all are both successful in your own right. And it's funny, sometimes it's the people that we think are not going to be successful that do it the most untraditional route, right? I mean, look at how you've gotten to where you are.
Well, and it's funny, you talked about kind of flying under the radar, and Blake, one thing he was always great at was the kind of PR side of everything. And he reminds me in a lot of ways from what I remember. Again, this was a lifetime ago. He was a kid, when we used to know each other. But remind me a lot of what I see, and I've never met Adam Newman, but it reminds me there were a lot of kind of personality similarities, and this huge vision, big bold PR, go for swing for the fences on things, and those are the people that change the world, and that's not really my style. I'm more of just a kind of conservative, incremental, kind of a guy. But it's a little bit humbling watching people like that who are able to kind of just dream huge and swing for the fences, and they don't care if they fail a couple times, and all of a sudden they hit the grand slam.
Speaking of, Adam just got another 350 million.
I heard
his new multifamily venture, and literally my post was, I'm pretty vocal, and I was like, apparently this investor did not watch the documentary or the movie, but again, I mean, he's able to sell ice to Eskimos.
He's what does his wife say in the show? You're a supernova.
Yeah.
Well, and
oh my God, I need somebody whispering that in my ear every time I have a tough moment. Babe, you're a supernova.
maybe my wife is too smart and has too much common sense to blow smoke at me like that. But it is interesting. It's easy to bag on Adam, but I think Adam did our whole industry a huge service. He was able to do things that yes, there were all kinds of issues, and there should have been a counterbalance to a lot of that. And WeWork might still be going, obviously it's going, but going on the trajectory it was. But maybe you can't have it both ways. Maybe in order to be that kind of person, do that kind of thing, you have to have, some recklessness to it. I
think the world might take both kinds, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be the supernova. So, wait, so finish the dry clean. So first I have a question. You went to college and went to class and ran this business.
I didn't say I went to class. I do have a degree. It was funny. I do have a finance degree, and my dad always makes fun of me because I did graduate very high in my class, and he would ask if I was going to class, and I said, Dad, I'm doing the bare minimum to get a 4.0 this semester, the bare minimum I can possibly do. And so I graduated with a finance degree. It comes in handy from time to time a little bit, but I don't really do anything that related to finance. I think you asked about the laundry business. We did that. There's kind of another part of that story. So we ran it for 3 or 4 years after buying Blake's company out. And then we were looking to try to sell it because it was just a hard way to make a living. And we'd already started Meridian Business Centers, and it had been going for a couple of years. And we had, I think, 2 locations at the time. We were making more money doing that than we were doing this whole laundry business that has, a bunch of employees working all night long at laundromats and all this. And we're like, we need to try to sell that. And we tried to sell it first to a friend of mine who's I went to college with, and his dad was going to provide a loan for it. And his dad didn't want to broker the deal. So he put his business partner to be the mediator. So I was going to try to sell the business to a friend of mine, and my friend's dad's friend was going to be the mediator. Well, the deal fell through. It didn't work. I wanted too much, and he wanted to pay too little, and we didn't make a deal. So we ended up hiring a manager, a lady who had started a competitor at Baylor University, a very small one. And we were impressed with her. And so we hired her. She rolled Baylor into the fold, and we paid her a salary and then let her earn, I think it was 10% per year ownership in the company in addition to the salary. So she ran it for 4 or 5 years. It was a total win-win. She ran it for 4 or 5 years, got like 50% of the equity in that period of time, paid us plenty of money, which allowed us to start Meridian and never earn it. We lived off of that. And then she took out an SBA loan and bought the other half of it for more than we were trying to sell the whole thing for before. And it was a huge windfall kind of for both sides. And she and her husband remain good friends of ours to this day. Every election, they come over on the Tuesday night and watch the results with us. And they then expanded to 30 or 40 different colleges in 20 different states. And they sold to Procter & Gamble just a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And then the guy, the mediator guy who I first tried to sell to, who didn't work, when I was probably 24 years old, was impressed with me, even though we didn't transact a deal. And then when I wanted to buy out my business partner 4 years ago, he was the money source, who I had met in a failed business negotiation, and then he ended up, so he owns a third of my company, and he is my business partner.
That's amazing.
That's
I didn't know
wild.
that part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Wait, and you got into the Meridian business because you needed a place to run your dry cleaning business.
It was an existing executive suite.
Yeah.
And we officed there. So we basically bought our landlord. And it was like a lot of the, this industry, the history back in the 90s and early 2000s, this was we started officing there in 97, and we closed the deal in 01, but we probably started looking at buying it in 2000, kind of just before the dot-com bubble in September 11th and all that. And a lot of in the 90s, executive suites were mostly owned by old ladies who had a bunch of secretaries typing documents for a bunch of men in the offices who didn't have computers. It was a very Mad Men 1960s-y kind of a business, right? And that was starting to kind of go the way of the dinosaur, obviously, around the turn of the century. And so a lot of these old kind of secretarial service executive suites were dying off. And so we kind of saw an opportunity. The first 7 locations that we added were that scenario. It was a location that was struggling. We went in, refreshed it, took all the old ferns out and, Oriental rugs, and updated the places and filled them up, and just kind of did it that way.
So fast forward, one of the reasons Gio was like, we need to talk to Flip. He's flying under the radar, and he's signing leases. So tell us about what's your deal structure? How do you like to get things done? And why leases? Yeah, so a couple of reasons. One, I get the there are some definite pros, and I'm not anti-management agreement. We actually have, I think, 3 of them. I think with 4 of them. I get the pros. I love the alignment between landlord and operator in a management structure. I love offloading the risk to somebody else. That's cool. But when COVID came and all the writing, all was about, hey, everybody's just gonna do management deals from here on out. This is too risky of a business to be in. My brain kind of went, well, if I'm a landlord, how is that fair? Why just because we now realize there's real downside here, why does everybody get to shift all that risk to me? And to me, it seems like that there's some opportunity for people like me who are willing to actually kind of put their money where their mouth is in certain locations. For me, if it is a slam dunk location, so in DFW, your South Lakes, your Uptowns, your Legacies. If I go to Phoenix and you're in, Kierland, or the areas that we're looking at, would like to be in, there's zero doubt in my mind that it's going to succeed. I don't need downside protection. I mean, I've done this through the dot-com bubble, through 2001, through the Great Recession of 2009, through COVID. If that didn't kill me off and make me unable to pay my rents, then what will? So I see opportunity in, a lot of these buildings that I'm talking to, almost every one, say, okay, are you looking for a management deal or a lease? And when I say lease, their eyes light up, they're now ready to talk. And so I also think this business has a lot of the, I realize I could still grow adding just management deals, but I have to pick, I don't want to call them second tier buildings, but I may not be able to get the exact building I want. And this way I can add the right buildings exactly like I want. And like I said, if I've been through everything we've been through for 21 years and never needed to renegotiate or shut down or, miss a rent payment, what in the future could possibly cause it to happen? So, I'm just not that. I'd rather not share the upside if I don't need the downside protection. The other thing for me about management agreements, the reason why I'm a little worried that they're getting a little bit too prevalent. Again, I like them in concept. We may do more in the future when a circumstance is right. The thing that I worry about with them is the lack of vetting, because every building thinks they need a flex space in it. And every operator who does management agreements is willing to say, yeah, I'll go there and yeah, I'll go there, because they got no skin in the game. And nobody's there to tap the brakes if it's just not a good market, a good opportunity, a good building. That's not to say every management deal is that. 90% of them aren't that. But for the bad ones, there's nobody there to tap the brakes. And so that's a little scary.
Yeah, and I think Jamie and I are actually dealing with this with one of our relationships in California, and we won't name the brand, but what's happening is you have some of these brands just sending boilerplate letters to every landlord that has the square footage availability, and then they're like, oh my gosh, they chose us. And then when you get an expert in the door, you're like, okay, why did they choose you? Well, they're not doing any due diligence other than there's availability, right? And if they can find someone to put put the money up to do the deal, again, why wouldn't they, right? It's very little risk on their part. It's a dot on the map. It's a way to grow. And I think that's what I've loved about you from the beginning is you're very methodical on your overall process, your growth, your deal structure is huge. And you just know that you don't have to force a deal. And there's so many people out there forcing deals right now, whether it be management deals or even leases, that it makes it difficult to be successful if you don't have the right deal structure.
Yeah, I'd say two things about that. One is, this industry, again, there's generally two camps, and we try to play in this sort of neat underserved niche in between. But you either have these boring old executive suites that understand what a P&L, and they understand pro formas, and they understand how to get your revenue better than your expenses. And you got all these exciting, sexy co-working spaces that understand all these experiential things, but a lot of times really have no clue how to be profitable. And everybody needs to get what the other has and needs both, because you really can't do this without both. You can't run an old executive suite like you did in 2005, and you can't run this experience business that has no path that's a realistic path to profits. And we talk about the four legs of the stool. There's like four legs of the stool that sort of hold up any successful operator or even single location. There's the real estate side, being in the right building with the right deal terms. There's the design side, fitting it out inside to be a thing that people want. There's the sales and marketing side, and then there's the customer experience side. And if any one of those fails, the whole thing may not be great. But the first two, the real estate side and the design side, once you do them, they're pretty fixed. It's almost impossible to change. 3 and 4, you can always, so if I've looked at buying operators before, I get approached a lot to take over different operators. And if 3 and 4 are wrong and 1 and 2 are right, then it's a wonderful opportunity. I can fix their 3 and 4 tomorrow. But if 1 or 2 are wrong, the real estate's wrong, or the fit out is wrong, there's really not much you can do. And unfortunately, I think we have, quite a few of them in our industry where there's something fundamentally wrong with either 1 and 2 or 1 or 2 that they're gonna make it really tough for anybody to succeed.
Yeah, and you're right. And that's the hardest part for me. And I know Jamie looks at a bunch of stuff, is when we look at deals, and it's like, you can't ever make this floor plan efficient to make money, right? And so you have someone else that takes it thinking they can fix it. But I mean, if you've got a 12-foot hallway, then you can't add another row of offices. Then what do you do with that hallway, right? You can put co-working in, and it's just hard to make work. And so I think we've seen a lot of that shifting right now from one brand to the other with these landlords that want to reuse the existing fit out they have. But the reality is you can't.
It's a tricky business because, to your point, like 1 and 2 are decided before you open your doors. And to your point, there's no going back. So you get those wrong, you make it's
another complicating factor here, like you said, Jamie, if you get 1 and 2 wrong, you're dead. And people are looking at, okay, well then how do I get 1 and 2 right? And they're looking at, the last couple of years has been such a an interesting deal with COVID, that you can't really look at that. And so everybody's looking at, say, 2016 to 2019, when it was almost like a gold rush, where you could build out a bad space in a bad location and charge way too much and still be fine. And now that everybody's had to sort of sharpen their pencils, that doesn't work anymore. So really very few people have any examples to look at for where should I be? What should my deal terms be like? What should I charge? What should I fit it out like? Because again, the last 2 or 3 years has been a best show, and the 2 or 3 years before that was a gold rush. And so what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting as we push forward, and we're seeing more and more of these landlords start trying to get involved, whether it be through management deals or through their own white labels, or just even building their own team, right? I think a lot of people think this business is easier than it really is, right? And I think you're 20 plus years in the business, right? And there's a huge learning curve as far as I'm concerned.
I would say it's a simple business that's really easy to get wrong.
Yeah, I've watched some people who really know business really fail at this.
Yeah.
And all of my friends, when I tell them what I do for a living or meet new friends, they say, oh, so it's just like you just live on a beach? It's kind of like mailbox money business, right? I'm like, yeah, no, but I'm glad you think that. And it is a little dangerous when buildings think that. When buildings try to do this, and some will do fine at it, they do have the added advantage of if they fail, they're not having to pay rent. It's kind of like their space is vacant, so they don't have as much risk as we do when they fail. But I think it's going to be really hard for many of them to be good at it, because it's a whole different, real estate building ownership is a math business, and this is a customer service business.
Right.
Yeah.
Flip, I'm curious, you're opening, 30,000 foot floors. Is it that you have an end user that simply will not work from home? Like, do you have any, concerns, or do you, does anything keep you up at night around, the inertia of just like people not coming in, or does your member, do they come in?
I'd say both. Yes, I have worries, especially during COVID, when everybody's working from home and there were all these articles that, is the office dead?
Yeah.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry, my AirPods just died.
That's okay. Now we can't.
We can't hear you.
He's gonna try the dead AirPods. Nope.
This is where the flex uncensored thing is. You are pretty to look at, though. Oh, there you are.
Or why don't you guys talk amongst yourselves for a second? I'll grab another pair of AirPods.
Okay.
You're popular when you have extra AirPods or earpods to.
Can we hear you now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that.
So basically, she asked her famous question of what's keeping you up at night. Is it because your people aren't coming in, that your people may not keep coming in, and that's what you were kind of addressing?
Yes, that is the biggest worry since COVID. It has been mostly alleviated since COVID, because we're filling back up now, and we have it seems like a lot of people have tried the work from home thing and are done with it. Obviously, the amount of people working from home versus an office will never go back to like it was pre-COVID. And everybody's using the word hybrid. That means different things to different people. Everybody's talking about how the net result of that should be, benefit to us, that our type of space, that a lot of companies will pay for it. And, especially in suburban things closer to their homes, we'll just have to see. I feel like, especially with our niche in the industry being kind of unique, sort of like I said, there's a lot of people playing in the casual, fun, collaborative co-working space, and then there's some kind of depressing, antiquated feeling executive suites. For anybody looking for a private office that's today, they just don't have a lot of choices, and so I don't really worry about the market for what we do drying up. If I would worry a little bit more if I was sort of firmly in one of those two camps, although I feel like they'll be fine too. I feel like for the most casual space that is, really just for, call it, tech teams, that's a rising tide too. I feel like everybody says it, but I believe it. The future of workspaces is flex, and nobody wants to sign 10-year leases anymore, and that all of us are going to be full. It is taking a little longer than I would like. I would have loved it if this huge tsunami of demand had already hit, and it hasn't. We have similar demand now that we had pre-COVID, and that's fine. It's not any kind of 50% increase or anything, but it's we're filling up and doing well.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate everything you do for the industry. I mean, you sit on the board with Jamie and I of GWA, and you are the OG social butterfly at these events. So you've always got a group coordinated go to lunch or go to dinner or go to wine tours and all kinds of stuff.
If you want to meet Flip, he'll be the guy in the hallway at the GWA conference.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it is he hasn't changed through all this, right? I mean, your question of were you going to school and you're like, well, kind of, sort of, and that's still you, right? You still show up at these events. You still are a face that's always seen, but you're not always engaged in those sessions because quite honestly, I think you get more out of interacting with other people and just learning from them outside of that. So we're really grateful for everything you do and just always being consistent.
He's stuck.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Now we can. And we'll give you a big thank you for sharing your day off from jury duty with us. He can't come back. Should we just wrap it? Should we close for him?
The good thing is we get to edit.
Totally. Or we'll just say it's uncensored. He lost his AirPods. Yeah, we should. Okay. Should we just wave him goodbye?
Bye.